Lobster Magnet. Lobster's a 10 item, don't you grab it.
Hey guys, before we move on to your regularly scheduled video blog review content, just a quick special announcement. Because everything is a contest and life is nothing but a giant tournament arc, I've decided to steal Exclamation Point's gimmick of staging an imaginary subscriber tournament battle for YouTube supremacy. That's right, I'm coming for you, Exclamation Point. We shall meet in the fields of Valhalla, weapons in hand as we face off in a video essay showdown to once and for all determine who is the champion, who shall walk away from the fields of battle in unending internet glory. So how about you? Give me everything you... Oh god. Oh god, Jesus Christ. He is over 60,000 subscribers. Crap. Okay, there's no way I'm ever going to compete with that. Okay, so Mr. Punctuation Face is a bit out of my league, but that doesn't mean I can't start from the bottom, because every underdog's gotta start somewhere. And stick around, folks, because the first match is gonna be a good one. My first opponent is the YouTube channel for a company I used to work for. They only have around 2,700 subs, but this fight is personal, because I wasted a year and a half of my life being yelled at by the CEO who constantly told me how my content wasn't up to his company's illustrious standards, which mostly consisted of this.
Jarek Media, Digital Lab, Studies, Series Language Protocols. Juan.
Yes, that's right. That's how Mr. Wall Street thinks he can win the internet. It's been my dream to crush him with my YouTube channel and to do what they couldn't accomplish over the past 2 years. So hit that subscriber count. Let's show them who's got the real eye of the tiger. This is my first opponent on the YouTube ladder of success. This is the Spider Rico fight I need to win as I climb up the ladder towards turning this into a full-time career. So if you don't want to let that douchebag Wall Street millionaire win, then hit that subscribe button, and as soon as we win this fight, I'll let you guys know who the next opponent is. Now back to your regularly scheduled video blog review content. Welcome to Lobster Magnet's Review, the channel, a review. I'm here to talk about the season finale of Game of Thrones, the final episode of Season 7, where all the cards have been laid out on the table as we talk about Episode 7 of Season 7, The Dragon and the Wolf, which sees the long-awaited fan-fiction uniting of Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen as they form a weird aunt-nephew incest relationship, which of course neither of them are aware of, except for Samwell and, good old Bran, the exposition machine. This was a pretty good episode, obviously not as dramatic as the last week's Lake Siege, but, we did get some long-term payoffs in the sense that, now everyone knows about the White Walkers and that they're real. We had a great scene where, everyone meets in the Dragon Pit, and we get to see Cersei at her most, malicious, and we get to see Euron be a complete jackass, which is, of course, what he was always meant to be. Good old Euron Greyjoy, douchebag supreme. And, then they unleash the White, and, now finally everyone knows what the true enemy is. And, and on one level this is kind of satisfying. It's sort of like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, only, it's The Boy Who Cried Undead Walker, and it's kind of satisfying to see all the principal cast members finally see the central threat that's been looming off in the distance for, 6 years. But, there is a sort of central conflict. Wisecrack did an excellent video where they sort of talked about Game of Thrones' lack of surprising us, and I think that's sort of like a philosophical discussion in terms of, the series' prognosis. What made it so successful, what made George R.R. Martin's original books stand out so much, was the fact that they, took the grit and grime of the medieval era and put it up front and center versus the sort of flowery fantasy of Tolkien-esque stuff and all of its many imitators. And that's sort of what made it Game of Thrones universe, Song of Fire and Ice, feel much more grounded with all its incest and political infighting and graphic gritty detail. That graphic gritty detail may not have been, covered by the show as exclusively as it could have been. On the Flophouse, they had an interesting discussion where, several of those guys who were, writers for, The Daily Show talked about how, they were fans of the book originally and how they were kind of disappointed about the fact that, they feel like the HBO series is like the prettied up version of Game of Thrones. Like the Hound isn't as ugly as he should be, Brienne of Tarth isn't as ugly as he should be, things aren't as ugly as they could be. And there's some truth to that. And now we're sort of seeing that come to full tilt in the sense that, like, Game of Thrones, like, George R.R. Martin, like, starts it off as an archetypical fantasy storyline in the sense that, like, oh my god, the White Walkers are going to come, they're going to kill everyone, there's this, like, unknowable, unfeeling, undead, evil force that are just so evil, they just want to kill everything. They're about as, like, generic as a bad guy as you could ask for in sort of like a prototypical fantasy series. But then it becomes about so much more about the Starks and the Lannisters and the War of Five Kings and this epic struggle, which, he is much more interested than the overarching threat of the White Walkers. But now that, like, there's, like, no more book material to draw upon, the showrunners are kind of, like, forced to, bring the characters together, which, it is still fun to see Jaime Lannister and Brienne of Tarth interact. It's a lot of fun to see all these characters who have been so different, like, Cersei looking at Daenerys and being like, oh, you're late, why aren't you here? And then Daenerys arrives in by dragon. But there's also a sort of, like, disconnect in the sense that, like, Daenerys has been so off stage and away from, like, the main players of Westeros that, like, seeing her and them finally interact, on one level you could say it's a payoff. On the other, it also feels like, what is she? Why is she even there? What does she have to contribute? She's been so distant from any of their storylines that it almost feels like she's just sort of like crashing down the wall and saying, hey, I'm here, and like there's this sort of dissonant feeling that like feels like maybe they shouldn't be together, or maybe her story was heading in another direction. But as I said before, the showrunners who are steering this massive ship, ultimately, they've got these actors who all have, like, expensive contracts, and they've got to use them, and that's just the reality of fucking television. You can't keep on introducing more and more characters, even though the fact that, like, Game of Thrones has had hundreds of characters over the course of its run. I'm sure, like, when the final season comes, like, Entertainment Weekly is going to do, like, some photo shoot where they have, like, every deceased actor all together, or maybe just, like, every person who's ever been on screen in one gigantic, like, cast regathering. And it'll be this huge, epic, memorable thing of the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, sort of, like, crescendos. But, that's the reality of when you're, like, making a TV series. You have a lot of logistics to handle, and one of those logistics is making sure you keep all the principal talent well paid and happy so they continue to go on, even if they ascend to other things. So that's why, Cersei Lannister, for all intents and purposes, should be fucking dead. I don't like her status as, like, supreme villain, because I don't think she's, like, smart enough to earn it, and that's one of my things that irks me. I kind of wish, like, out of all the character deaths that she got one, but Lena Headey, she's done some great work, and, she's earned herself as, like, one of the principal leading cast members, so she gets the good paycheck, and she gets probably, guaranteed episodes, and her, $100,000 or $200,000 per an episode or whatever. That's why she gets to stick around versus, like, just getting rid of her. But, we also had, like, a big death with Littlefinger. And, like, in one level, you could say this is, like, kind of, like, satisfying to watch, because Littlefinger has been, like, the architect of so much misery of the Starks. But on the other hand, I wanted him to last a little bit longer. He obviously wasn't going to win the Game of Thrones, but and he was, like, in midst of enemy territory, against people who have every reason to kill him, and plus he had Bronn, the fucking exposition machine, and nobody's safe from Bronn's gaze, so his past actions came to haunt him. But, like, honestly, one of my favorite sort of subplots that was going on throughout the Game of Thrones series was the sort of, like, Batman-Joker dynamic between Varys and Littlefinger. Like, I thought the two, whenever they were, like, together, had some of the best scenes together, and I sort of loved it how, like, Varys was, like, fighting for the side of order and for the common folks, and trying to make the best as he can for the people of Westeros, while fucking Littlefinger is just, like, they're literally like the Joker and Batman, Varys is for fucking order, stability, while Littlefinger is just like an agent of chaos and anarchy who just seems to want to sow as much discord so he can reap whatever he can, and he's just always like has 4 or 5 plans going on at the same time, and I really wanted to see them together, like one more scene. I wanted to see them reunited, Littlefinger's on the side of ice, and Varys is on the side of fire, and now they're forced to, like, kind of work together for the White Walkers. But so I think that was a little bit of a waste to like kill him off as like another villain bites the dust. But it's a very cathartic scene to like see him finally like get his comeuppance, and Arya slits his throat after like the sort of wheel spinning that we had of like, he's breaking up the Stark family, that Littlefinger, he's such a duplicitous thing. And a lot of people were complaining that that was some of the dumbest, weakest writing in the entire series, to just have like Sansa and fucking Arya turn against each other. And like I'm not quite sure if I hated it as much as other people, but I can sort of understand the argument of why people were not happy with it. But now we have the fucking armistice, and everyone is united against the Night King, and finally winter is fucking here after taking forever. Whatchamacallit, the good old Night King rides Viserion, his undead white dragon, and burns down a section of the wall, and the undead are about ready to frickin' march in Westeros, so winter is here. Hopefully the next season will be like, 6 episodes, 6 hours of just like non-stop undead battle. and it's also nice to see that like Jaime Lannister, like, in the books, like he kind of turns his back on Cersei in like book 4, Feast for Crows. And then we kind of like get that moment here where, he's like, fuck it, we gotta fight, he's enough of a hero to understand that, like, their bickering and squabbling isn't enough to, end, the threat of the dead, and the threat of the dead is, like, what an existential threat. And in some ways, he's kind of hyped up for it, because, like, Jaime Lannister is always a guy who, like, admired the knights of old. He wants to be that knight guy. He wants to be the noble, chivalrous knight from the stories and legends, and now he quite literally has a monster that he can slay without any enemies, so this is like what he's been waiting for his entire life. And, his newly sort of reformed character is to leave behind the toxicity of his fucking evil sister and move forward to actually, do something that's actually in the interests of the rest of the realm. So we'll see if they, like, complete his, like, and give him a full redemption arc. Because it will be fun to see him, like, fight for the good guys and, see if he can use any of his, like, military talent in terms of, like, holding off the undead, since he sees it as, like, such a huge threat. And, oh god, Cersei, I just want her to be done with. And I hated the whole thing where Jen's like, she's actually lying, and she's sending Euron Greyjoy to go get the Golden Company. How the fuck did she pay off the Iron Bank? Didn't Daenerys, like, fucking burn all of the gold and the loot, when, she fucking, hit the loot train, the Lannister loot train with her dragons and Dothraki? Like, I thought that was the whole fucking point of that scene, is that, like, all the spoils of war were destroyed by her. But I guess Cersei still got her gold, and now we're, for book fans, we're gonna see the Golden Company at some point, and Okay, so there are basically 3 storylines that are gonna come up in the final season. There's the Night King, who's going to, we're going to get a lot of, like, personal action sequences and fighting with the Night King, and probably a lot of heroic moments as we have, like, characters teaming up to face off against undead, and lots of big, epic action sequences. The second thing is we've got the Cersei conflict in terms of, like, when does Cersei make her move, when does, who winds up fighting with her, and whether or not the Night King conflict will be, resolved, and then she'll be the, like, last boss. And then, of course, there's the sort of question of the succession of the Iron Throne. Now that we know that Jon Snow is technically the rightful heir of the Iron Throne, will that throw a wrench in his relationship with Daenerys? And quite possibly, will the Song of Fire and Ice wind up fighting each other before the end? I think the most fan-fiction-y thing that could possibly happen is, that they'll reveal Jon Targaryen's lineage, and then he'll get to, like, ride on the other dragon, because, it'll like him, because he's a Targaryen. So then, Dany and Jon will both be riding their dragons, and they'll be fighting in an epic final battle, which, in some ways, kind of, like, seems a little too fan-fiction-y, but, I feel like that's gonna happen. I feel like it's been implied that, Jon Snow can ride a dragon, because Drogon was kind of, like, nice to fucking Jon Snow, and that other dragon needs another rider, and we need a epic scene of Jon Snow and Dany flying on dragons to fight the undead Night King, which I still cannot believe is, like, something we're gonna probably get. But there's a good chance of it. So if I had to rate this episode, I'd say it was an 8. Like, I do agree that, like, the sort of fan fiction-y elements and the fact that, like, there's no more George R.R. Martin material to draw upon is definitely sort of, like, turning the show into something like a more conventional fantasy story. But thankfully, because of all the good character work and the relationships and the general direction from all the previous seasons, it's still entertaining, even if it does kind of feel a lot more conventional than it once was. The real question, and the only person to blame for that is, like, George R.R. Martin himself. I think the fact that he's, like, loves to sort of, like, create these twists means that he's, like, backed himself into a corner where he doesn't know how to, like, come up with creative stuff to keep the shit going and keep on surprising people. And that's why the, fucking 6th and 7th book are taking so long. And, chances are the TV show is going to wrap up before we get those books. Which is really, 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 really fucking pathetic. I don't know what you're doing, man, GRRM. When, like, the fucking multi-universe, multi-continent spanning film crew is able to beat you with just you sitting around in your fucking mansion in New Mexico with no distractions whatsoever and millions of dollars hanging on the line. And you've, like, been releasing these chapters for years. Like, what's going on there, man? What's going on there with your fat suspenders? But yeah, I give the episode an 8 out of 10. It was still very entertaining, and there's a lot of cathartic payoff, even if it does feel like, we're in Game of Thrones fan fiction land right now. But, like, on one hand, like, they've mined as much as they can out of George R.R. Martin's material, and, he hasn't given them any great new shocking twists to use. So, when you run out of that, then it's just a matter of, like, condensing your cast and following through the sort of, like, more conventional story beats that have been laid out of the fantasy story and paying those off, because it's time for those roosters to come to rest. And it's unavoidable, it's inevitable. Some people say that, the Game of Thrones writing is completely dead, but I don't really see, like, how you could go anywhere else when you've run out of blueprint and you just sort of have a conventional story and you got to wrap it up, and that's how. Those are the tools to use to wrap it up. It was funny. I was showing good old Zavul, the final scene, because he's a book reader who watches the show intermittently, but hasn't been keeping up and current with it. And I showed him the scene of Viserion destroying the wall, and he was like, "Oh, that's bullshit. The wall's too thick to be burned down. And why isn't it like breathing ice? Doesn't make any sense." And it's like, come on, man. That's the tools that they were given. There's no Horn of Winter like in the books. Those zombies got to get over the wall somehow, and that's like the easiest tool to, like, get them through that wall, so we can actually, like, move on to the final battle. So yeah, it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. So thank you for watching this video. Like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you've enjoyed the little promo I included in the beginning of this. I don't know, I'll include some, like, Night King merchandise as the Amazon affiliate. Go check out the Night King and buy him, or buy something you actually do want off of Amazon. It helps me out. And remember, lobsters and tennis, don't you grab it.
Lobsters made of light.